The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, the room humming with the excitement of 1,000 voices, all converging for one purpose: to witness one of the most brilliant minds of our time. Elon Musk, the visionary entrepreneur behind Tesla and SpaceX, was set to give a keynote speech at a conference dedicated to the future of technology. But no one expected what happened next. The event had been scheduled for months, and the organizers were prepared for an evening filled with discussions on artificial intelligence, space exploration, and renewable energy. Yet, as Elon stood at the podium, ready to launch into his usual reflections on the next frontier of innovation, something unexpected happened. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? A frail, elderly woman rose from her seat near the front. Her silver hair was neatly tied into a bun, and her face, though lined with age, held a quiet strength. She was dressed in a simple blue cardigan, her hands clutching a well-worn leather purse. Her presence was unexpected. She seemed out of place among the tech moguls, young engineers, and entrepreneurs who filled the room. Yet there was something undeniably compelling about her. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice soft but clear. The room immediately fell silent, a wave of curiosity sweeping through the audience. Elon paused, momentarily thrown off guard. He wasn't used to interruptions at his talks, especially not from someone like this. He adjusted his glasses and smiled, the usual spark of curiosity in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. The woman hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I have a question that has been on my heart for many years. I'm not sure if you'll have an answer, but I would be grateful if you could share your thoughts." Elon nodded, intrigued. The room was still. People exchanged curious glances, some wondering what kind of question this elderly lady might ask. "You've built rockets that have touched the stars," she continued, her eyes now meeting his directly. "You've brought cars to the future, and you're making the impossible seem possible. But I wonder, Mr. Musk, do you believe in God? And if you do, what do you think he's like?" The question hung in the air, the weight of it settling over the crowd. Elon's face, which had been lively and engaged just moments before, now seemed momentarily lost in thought. The question was unexpected, personal, spiritual even, far removed from the technological questions he usually fielded. The audience shifted uneasily. Some were visibly uncomfortable. Was this the right place to ask such a question? Others, however, were fascinated by the audacity of the question. It was rare to see someone of Mrs. Evelyn's age speak so directly to Elon Musk, let alone ask him something so deeply philosophical. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. Even Elon seemed caught off guard, as if he had just been handed a puzzle he had never considered. His mind, always quick and sharp when it came to rockets and renewable energy, now wrestled with a much more personal conundrum. He had always been open about his skepticism toward organized religion, but this wasn't the time for a cold, scientific answer. He took a deep breath, then smiled again, though this time there was something different in his expression. There was a gentleness in his voice as he spoke. "That's a great question," he began, his words measured. "I think that the universe is so vast and mysterious that it's difficult for any of us to truly know the answer. But I do think there's something incredible about life itself, about the way the universe works, the laws of physics, the way everything fits together." He paused, clearly trying to frame his thoughts. "I don't know if that's what you'd call God, but there's something about the order of it all that feels purposeful. There's beauty in it, something far beyond what we can truly understand." Mrs. Evelyn looked at him intently, her expression unreadable. The crowd remained silent, waiting for more. Elon's words had given them a glimpse into his mind, a mind that, despite all its brilliance, still seemed uncertain when it came to matters of the soul. He continued, his voice growing a bit more introspective. "I've always been more focused on the tangible, on what we can do with science and technology. But there are moments in the quiet of the night or when I'm staring out into space, when I feel a sense of awe that goes beyond just what I can explain with math and equations." The room was quiet, the hum of excitement from earlier now replaced by a palpable sense of contemplation. Mrs. Evelyn's heart raced. There it was, the kind of answer she had hoped for, though it wasn't exactly what she had expected. It wasn't the definitive answer about God that she had imagined, but it was something deeper. It was a recognition that there was mystery in the universe, something beyond the reach of human understanding, even for someone as brilliant as Elon Musk. Her hands tightened around her purse. The emotion she had been holding in began to bubble to the surface. Elon's words stirred something inside her, a long-buried sense of wonder and doubt that she hadn't felt in years. The audience, still captivated by the exchange, slowly began to murmur among themselves. Some were nodding in agreement, others still processing the unexpected vulnerability in Elon's answer. Mrs. Evelyn, however, sat quietly, her thoughts swirling. She had come here today not just to ask a question, but to seek something. Reassurance, a confirmation that her lifelong questions about faith, about God, were still worth asking. Elon Musk's words had left her with more questions than answers, but something deep inside told her that this was only the beginning of a journey she wasn't prepared for. As the crowd slowly began to applaud, Mrs. Evelyn remained in her seat, lost in thought. She wasn't sure if Elon Musk's answer had brought her closer to understanding God, but she knew one thing for certain. This moment would change her in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. And as the applause died down and the lights dimmed, a quiet voice whispered inside her heart, "Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers. Maybe it's the questions that matter most." Mrs. Evelyn had always been a woman of quiet strength. At 78, she didn't stand out in a crowd, but those who knew her well understood the power behind her soft-spoken words. She was the type of person who had lived through decades of change without ever seeking the spotlight. Her life had been full of hardship, loss, and love. The kind of quiet, relentless endurance that shaped her into the resilient woman she was today. She had spent most of her youth as a teacher, nurturing young minds in a small town in the Midwest. Her students adored her, not just for her intelligence, but for the warmth she exuded in every lesson. She was the kind of teacher who stayed late to help struggling students, who made sure every child knew they mattered. And she loved her work. It had been her passion, her calling. But teaching wasn't just a profession for Mrs. Evelyn. It was a mission. She believed in shaping young hearts and minds, in teaching them not just to read or write, but to think and dream. Her late husband, George, had been the love of her life. A quiet man with a deep, steadfast faith, George had been her rock. Their relationship had always been one of mutual respect. He was her anchor when life's waves became too overwhelming, and she was his companion through the ups and downs of raising a family, moving across states, and weathering the storms of life together. They had never been wealthy, but they had been rich in love and family. George was a man of strong beliefs, particularly his faith in God. Every night, after dinner, George would sit in his favorite armchair by the window, reading his Bible. He never forced his beliefs on anyone, but his quiet devotion had always been a source of peace for Evelyn. They would often talk about life, love, faith, and the universe. George believed in God wholeheartedly. He saw the divine in the everyday miracles of nature, in the love between people, and in the quiet moments of reflection that marked the passage of time. Evelyn had always respected his faith, but she hadn't shared it entirely. She had believed in God, of course, but her belief had been more tentative, more like an old habit she had never quite questioned. She went to church on Sundays, said her prayers at night, and participated in the rituals of faith that had been passed down through generations. But inside, she wondered if there was something more, something that could explain the tragedies, the losses, the uncertainties of life. Could faith alone truly answer those questions? When George had passed away 5 years ago, Evelyn's world had been turned upside down. His death was unexpected. One moment he was there, reading his Bible by the window, and the next, he was gone, taken by a sudden heart attack. The shock of it had been immense, and with it came a wave of questions Evelyn had never dared ask before. If God existed, why had he taken George so suddenly, without warning? Was there a plan, a purpose to all of it? Or was life just a series of random events, a cosmic game of chance? Her grief was deep, and in the quiet moments after George's death, Evelyn found herself grappling with those questions. It wasn't just the loss of her husband that weighed heavily on her heart, but the overwhelming feeling of isolation. The world had seemed so much larger and colder without him by her side. She was alone now, in a way she had never been before, and with that loneliness came an urgency to find answers. She started spending more time in her small garden, where the flowers George had planted still bloomed each spring. It was a place of peace, but also of silence. The silence that filled her heart as she sat among the roses and daisies was both comforting and unsettling. What was life all about, really? What did it mean to believe in God? And if there was a God, what did he want from her now that George was gone? Evelyn had tried to fill the void with her teaching. She continued to volunteer at the local school, where she was beloved by the younger generation. The children came to her with their questions, their troubles, and their joys. She felt needed by them, but the weight of her own unanswered questions never left her. She would go to church, sit in the pews, listen to the hymns, and offer up her prayers, but somehow, it all felt like it wasn't enough. It was during one of these restless nights, lying awake in bed, that she stumbled upon the article about Elon Musk. It wasn't something she'd normally read. She was no expert in technology or space travel, but there was something about the man, his ideas, and his vision for the future that intrigued her. She began following his work, fascinated by his audacity to believe in the impossible. As she read more about his ventures, her mind started to wander to a place she hadn't been in years. The place of deep questions, of spiritual wondering. It was one article in particular, a piece on Musk's thoughts about the future of humanity and the role of technology in shaping the human experience, that made her realize something. Elon Musk, despite his overwhelming success in the material world, was someone who seemed just as deeply invested in the unknowns of the universe as she was in her own questions about God. He spoke of space, of artificial intelligence, and of the potential for humanity to transcend the limitations of the earth. But there was a certain humility in his words, an acknowledgement that, despite all his knowledge, there was still so much we didn't understand. That was when Evelyn had an idea. She didn't expect much from her encounter with Musk. She wasn't a woman who expected answers from the famous or the wealthy. But something about his mind, his curiosity, his willingness to challenge the status quo, made her wonder if he might offer a different kind of answer to her question about God. Maybe he had a perspective she hadn't considered, a view that could reconcile her questions with her faith. So, she attended the conference. She sat quietly among the crowd, feeling both out of place and deeply drawn to the moment. And when the chance came, when the opportunity presented itself to ask Elon Musk the question that had haunted her for years, she took it. Mrs. Evelyn wasn't just asking a question about God. She was asking for peace, for understanding, for something that could fill the hollow space George's absence had left behind. She was searching for meaning, and now, it seemed, she had a chance to find it. The silence in the room stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft rustle of people shifting in their seats. Mrs. Evelyn's question had left an indelible mark on the atmosphere, one that neither the crowd nor Elon Musk seemed ready to shake off. For a brief moment, the buzz of the conference had evaporated, replaced by something quieter and deeper. Elon stood at the podium, his fingers lightly gripping the edges, his gaze fixed on the elderly woman who had asked her unexpected question. His mind, typically quick and calculating, was processing the weight of her words, trying to sort through the unexpected nature of the inquiry. It was rare that someone in the tech industry, someone who often focused on the tangible and measurable, would be confronted with a question so inherently philosophical, even theological. As the audience waited, they were watching not just a moment of personal vulnerability but the inner workings of a man who had, for much of his career, steered clear of such personal matters. Elon was known for his bold ventures into space, his innovative advancements in artificial intelligence, and his visions of a future far beyond Earth. But here, in front of a humble woman who had lived through decades of history, Elon faced a question that wasn't about technology or Mars. It was about God. And that was a question he hadn't asked himself in a long time. "Thank you for that," he said after a long pause, his voice a little softer than usual. "I guess, like you, I've spent a lot of time thinking about these big questions. Not just about the future of humanity, but about the purpose of it all." The crowd shifted, sensing a shift in the air. Some had expected a quick, rehearsed answer, perhaps a line about science or the universe, or maybe a joke. Instead, they were witnessing something more raw, more unfiltered. Elon Musk, the man who built rockets and changed industries, was engaging in a moment of reflection, and the audience could feel it. Mrs. Evelyn's eyes stayed locked on him, her heart pounding. She had asked her question knowing she might never get the answer she expected, but she hadn't anticipated how much Elon's response would resonate with her own struggles. His words were not a definitive answer to her question, but they were enough to plant a seed in her mind. The room slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the audience resuming their attention as Elon began to transition back into his usual discussions of technology and the future. But for Mrs. Evelyn, the moment had shifted something deep inside her. His answer was not what she had imagined, but it had opened a door in her mind, a door she had hesitated to open for years. Back in her hotel room that night, Mrs. Evelyn sat by the window, looking out at the city lights below. The skyscrapers and flashing billboards were a far cry from her quiet little town, but it felt strangely comforting. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, the sound of people going about their lives, each person with their own set of dreams and struggles. Her mind kept returning to the question she had asked Elon Musk. It had been the culmination of years of uncertainty. She had spent so many nights questioning the meaning of life, wondering about the existence of God, and whether everything that had happened in her life, her marriage, her children, her losses, had a purpose. George had always told her to trust in God's plan, but how could she? The suddenness of his death had shaken her to her core, and even now, years later, she still struggled with the emptiness he had left behind. And then came Elon's answer, a blend of curiosity and wonder, tinged with a slight uncertainty. "There's something about the order of it all that feels purposeful," he had said. The words echoed in her mind. Purpose. She had never really considered that concept in relation to the cosmos, had always thought of purpose as something human, something connected to the life one built with others. But Elon Musk, someone who had unlocked the mysteries of space, had shared his awe of the unknown and implied that, maybe, purpose wasn't something we could always understand. Mrs. Evelyn thought about her own life, about the purpose she had tried to find in her faith, in her family, and in her work. Was there an underlying design to it all, or was it just a matter of making meaning out of the chaos of life? The evening stretched on, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with Elon Musk was just the beginning of something. She didn't know if she would ever fully understand his answer, but she had a feeling that it would spark a journey, one that would take her beyond the questions she had carried with her for so long. The next day, after the conference had ended, Mrs. Evelyn wandered the streets of the city, still absorbing the impact of her conversation with Elon Musk. She had a plane to catch, but she didn't feel in any rush to return to her quiet life just yet. There was something stirring inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. It was as if the question she had asked had cracked open a door she had forgotten about, a door leading to new possibilities, new ways of thinking about faith, about life, and about the universe. As she walked down a bustling avenue, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from her daughter, Hannah, asking how the conference had gone. Evelyn smiled, typing a quick response about the excitement of the event, leaving out the details of her question to Musk. Those were still too raw to share. But then, as she typed, another message appeared, this time from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. "Mrs. Evelyn, this is Elon Musk. I wanted to thank you for your question yesterday. It's not often that someone challenges me to think so deeply about these things. I've been reflecting on it myself, and just wanted to let you know that I appreciate your curiosity. Maybe we'll get the chance to talk more about it someday. Elon." Evelyn blinked, her hands trembling slightly as she read the message again. Elon Musk had reached out to her, personally. She hadn't expected this. It wasn't a grand philosophical answer, but the simple acknowledgement of her question felt like a gift. Her heart swelled, not just with the thrill of getting a message from someone so famous, but with the realization that, maybe, her search for meaning wasn't as solitary as she had thought. There was someone out there who understood the complexities of seeking answers, someone who had spent his life reaching for the stars, yet still pondered the mysteries of the soul. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt a spark of hope. Perhaps she wasn't alone in her journey after all. The next few days blurred into a haze for Mrs. Evelyn. She had never imagined that a simple question, one that had been festering in her heart for so long, would result in such an unexpected chain of events. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this moment with Elon Musk, of all people, had marked the beginning of something new, something transformative. Her hotel room had become a sanctuary of sorts. There, in the silence of the night, she had replayed the events of the conference over and over again in her mind. The way she had asked her question, the way Elon had paused before responding, and the way his words, though not entirely satisfying, had touched something deep within her. But it was the message she had received from him afterward that had turned everything upside down. She had shared her curiosity, her pain, her doubts, and in return, he had taken the time to acknowledge her. She hadn't expected that. Elon Musk, one of the most famous and influential people in the world, had responded to her with genuine thoughtfulness. It felt surreal, like something out of a dream. But as much as she wanted to just sit back and bask in the novelty of the message, she knew she had to move forward. There was still something she was searching for, a deeper understanding that could bridge the gap between her faith and the chaos of life. And then, just as she was about to leave for the airport, another message arrived from Elon. Mrs. Evelyn, I've been thinking more about our conversation. It's rare that someone challenges my thinking about something as fundamental as faith. If you're open to it, I'd like to invite you to spend some time with me and discuss your thoughts further. Perhaps we can continue our conversation in person. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Elon. The text was short, almost casual, but the invitation was clear, and it left her breathless. For a moment, Evelyn simply stared at the screen. She couldn't believe it. Elon Musk wanted to meet with her, to talk more about faith, about the mysteries of the universe. She had asked one simple question, and now she was being given an opportunity to explore that question with one of the most brilliant minds on the planet. She had no idea what this would lead to, but a part of her felt she had no choice but to accept. After all, what was the point of living a life where questions went unanswered? What was the point of wondering if there was a greater purpose if you never took the opportunity to seek it out? It wasn't an easy decision for Mrs. Evelyn. She had lived most of her life with a quiet sense of responsibility, a woman who cared for others more than herself, who always put the needs of her family and her students above her own desires. She had raised her children with love and sacrifice, and she had been George's unwavering partner through thick and thin. But this invitation, this opportunity, was something entirely different. She was being asked to step into uncharted territory, to challenge her own assumptions and beliefs. What would it mean to meet Elon Musk in person and have a conversation about God, the universe, and the purpose of life? Would she be able to keep up with his intellect? Would she even know how to talk about such complex ideas in a way that made sense to him, or to herself? But as she sat on the edge of her bed in her hotel room, looking at the text one more time, something in her heart told her that this was exactly what she had been waiting for. This was the chance to explore the very questions that had haunted her for years. And whether or not she found the answers, the journey itself would be worth taking. It wasn't long before Evelyn made the decision to fly out to California, where Elon Musk was headquartered at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto. She had never been to the West Coast before, and the thought of stepping out of her familiar life into this high-tech, fast-paced world was both exciting and intimidating. She packed lightly, as always, choosing comfort over style. A soft gray cardigan, a few pairs of slacks, and her favorite scarf were all she needed. She wasn't concerned about how she looked. This wasn't about appearances. This was about finding answers, or at least finding the courage to ask the right questions. The flight was long, but her mind was too preoccupied with her upcoming meeting to focus on anything else. She thought back to her days teaching school, back to the mornings spent with her students, all of them full of hope, full of dreams. She had always tried to instill in them the importance of questioning, of exploring the world, of looking beyond the obvious to find deeper meaning. And now, she was doing the very thing she had encouraged them to do. Questioning, exploring, looking beyond the obvious. The feeling of being on the precipice of something important, something life-changing, was both exhilarating and overwhelming. When the plane finally touched down at San Francisco International Airport, Evelyn felt her heart race. There was no turning back now. She was going to meet Elon Musk, the man who had captured the world's attention with his grand vision of the future, and perhaps, just perhaps, find some clarity about the questions that had always lingered in her mind. The drive from the airport to Palo Alto felt surreal. As the car wound its way through the bustling streets of Silicon Valley, Evelyn couldn't help but feel like a small fish in a vast ocean. Everywhere she looked, there were people in suits and tech industry professionals walking briskly between meetings, their phones pressed to their ears, their minds focused on innovation and progress. It was a world so different from her own. A world of possibilities, yes, but also a world that sometimes seemed to forget the deeper questions that drove human existence. When she finally arrived at the Tesla campus, she was escorted into a sleek, modern conference room. The walls were adorned with futuristic designs, and the air was crisp and cool. And there, standing by a large window that overlooked a garden of greenery, was Elon Musk. He greeted her with a warm handshake and a smile. "Mrs. Evelyn, it's a pleasure to meet you in person." She smiled back, surprised at how approachable he seemed, despite his fame and success. "Thank you for having me," she said, her voice steady but filled with awe. "I wasn't sure if I was out of my depth in coming here, but something tells me this is where I need to be." Elon gave a small chuckle. "You're not out of your depth at all. If anything, I'm the one who feels challenged by your questions." As they sat down together, Mrs. Evelyn felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in years, she was in a space where her doubts were welcome, where her search for meaning was seen as more than just a quirk of old age. Here, with Elon Musk of all people, she could ask the questions that had been building inside her for decades, and perhaps, together, they could find a way to understand the mysteries of life that had eluded her for so long. Elon Musk sat across from Mrs. Evelyn in the sleek, minimalist conference room, his eyes thoughtfully fixed on her. The soft hum of the room's advanced technology and the faint sounds of the Tesla campus outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant in this moment. In front of them was a world of big ideas, advanced rockets, and artificial intelligence. But in this quiet space, two people, one who had spent his life reaching for the stars, and one who had lived through decades of human history, were about to engage in a conversation that transcended technology and space exploration. Evelyn could feel the weight of the moment. It was surreal. She had never imagined that her journey, which had begun as a simple question at a tech conference, would bring her to this room, facing one of the most brilliant minds of her generation. But she knew now, more than ever, that this was the moment to ask the questions that had haunted her heart for so long. "So," Elon said after a few moments of silence, "tell me more about what's on your mind. You mentioned God, and that piqued my curiosity. What are you seeking? What is it that you don't understand?" Evelyn took a deep breath. She had thought about how to phrase her questions before, but now that she was here, in front of Elon, it felt different, more vulnerable, more personal. She adjusted in her chair and looked at him, the words coming slowly but deliberately. "I've spent my life believing in God," she began, her voice steady but reflective. "I was raised in the church. I've prayed. I've tried to live with faith. But as I've gotten older, I've started to wonder, what is the point of it all? I see people suffering, the world full of pain, and I wonder, if there is a God, why does it seem like so much is out of our control? Why do we have to face so much hardship?" Elon leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "That's a tough question. I think the search for meaning is something everyone goes through at some point in their life. And I don't have the answers, but I can tell you this. It's not all about having everything figured out. Sometimes, the questions themselves, the pursuit of understanding, are what matter." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "But don't you want some answers? Doesn't it bother you to look at the universe, at all the suffering, and not have a clear answer for why we're here?" Elon took a moment, his face softening with thought. "You're right," he said. "It does bother me. But I think the more we learn, the more we realize that there's so much we still don't know. I mean, think about it. We're standing on this tiny planet in an unimaginably vast universe. We're specks in the grand scheme of things. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of what's out there. And yet, I believe that it's the search for knowledge, the asking of questions, that is the most human thing we can do. Maybe that's where the meaning lies. Evelyn took in his words. So, you think meaning comes from the search itself? From the questions, rather than the answers? Exactly, Elon replied. For me, the purpose of life isn't just about finding a final answer. It's about making a difference while we're here. It's about pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible, whether that's through space exploration or solving problems here on Earth. And I think a big part of that is believing in something bigger than yourself. For me, that's the potential of humanity. But isn't that just ambition? Evelyn asked, her voice laced with curiosity. What about faith? What about something beyond science, beyond human achievement? Doesn't something have to guide us, something larger than just our ability to push forward? Elon paused, clearly contemplating her question. You know, I've never been religious. I didn't grow up in a household where faith was a big part of my life. But I respect people who believe in God, in something beyond themselves. And I do think there's something transcendent about life. Maybe we don't have all the answers, but I like to think there's a bigger purpose we can all be part of. Whether that's about the future of humanity or a higher power, I think we're all searching for meaning in our own way. Evelyn nodded slowly. It wasn't exactly the answer she had expected, but there was a certain resonance in Elon's words. Perhaps it wasn't so much about finding concrete answers to life's biggest questions as it was about acknowledging the mystery and continuing to search, even when the answers seemed out of reach. But, she said, leaning forward slightly, you must still have doubts, right? There must be times when you wonder if all of this, space travel, technology, everything, has any real meaning. When you look at the world, at the suffering, how do you reconcile that with the idea of something greater than ourselves? Elon's gaze softened. Yes, he said quietly, I do have doubts. All the time. When I see what's happening in the world, when I hear about injustice or tragedy, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. But I think that's where faith, of any kind, becomes important. Faith doesn't mean having all the answers. It means holding on to something when everything else feels uncertain. For me, that's the belief that humanity can make a difference, that we can build a better future. But I understand how that might not feel enough for everyone. Evelyn felt a spark of understanding. She had spent so much of her life looking for a clear-cut answer, something she could hold on to with certainty. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe it wasn't about getting a perfect answer. Maybe it was about the journey, the willingness to ask questions, to face uncertainty, and to search for meaning even when the road ahead seemed unclear. I've always believed in God, Evelyn said, her voice quiet but firm, but I don't know if I've ever really questioned it in the way I should have. I just accepted it, without truly understanding what it means. And now, I'm realizing that faith, belief, it's all about finding the courage to live with the unknown, to keep searching for meaning, even when the answers don't come easily. Elon gave her a thoughtful nod. I think that's a pretty wise way of looking at it. There's a lot of beauty in the search, don't you think? In the mystery? Evelyn smiled faintly. Maybe that's what I've been missing all along. The search itself is part of the answer. It's the willingness to question, to explore the unknown, that gives our lives meaning. For the first time since George's death, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace settle within her. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But she realized now that the pursuit of answers, through faith, through science, through the small moments of life, was where the real meaning lay. It was in the search. The conversation between Mrs. Evelyn and Elon Musk continued to unfold like a delicate dance, each step revealing something new, something profound. They were two people from vastly different worlds, one grounded in the steady rhythm of faith and tradition, the other propelled by the untamed frontier of technology and innovation. But as they spoke, the boundaries between those worlds began to blur. After a few moments of silence, Elon leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully as he stared out the window. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the garden outside. For a brief moment, the sleek, futuristic space they were in seemed to disappear, replaced by the simple beauty of nature. A reminder that even in the world of high-tech advancements, There was still something timeless about the earth they stood on. You mentioned before, Elon said, breaking the silence, about the suffering in the world and how hard it is to reconcile that with the idea of a benevolent God. I think that's something a lot of people wrestle with. I know I do. It's easy to look at the world and wonder if it's all just random, chaos without meaning. He paused, a flicker of something deep in his eyes. But sometimes, I wonder if the very act of questioning, of struggling to understand, is what gives us our humanity. Maybe it's not about finding all the answers. Maybe it's about living with the questions themselves. Evelyn's heart stirred with recognition. It was a perspective she hadn't considered before. She had spent so much time seeking the answers, trying to make sense of her faith and the world around her. But now, sitting here with Elon, she began to understand that the act of searching, of living in the tension between knowing and not knowing, might hold more meaning than the answers themselves. I've always thought that faith was about certainty, she said slowly. I thought it was about having the answers to life's big questions. But now I'm starting to wonder, maybe it's more about learning how to live with the uncertainty, about trusting in something beyond ourselves, even when we don't have all the facts. Elon nodded, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel as though he truly understood. Exactly, he said. And I think the same applies to everything else we do in life, whether it's technology, space exploration, or just living day to day. We don't know exactly what the future holds. We don't have all the answers. But we still have to keep moving forward, still have to keep asking questions. In a way, that's faith too. Mrs. Evelyn looked at Elon, her thoughts swirling. There was something about his calm, logical approach to the world that made her question her own approach to faith. For so long, she had viewed her belief in God as something fixed, something unchanging that she could cling to in times of doubt. But now, she realized that faith didn't have to be static. It could evolve, grow, and adapt just as she herself was evolving. Do you think, she said softly, that the pursuit of knowledge, whether it's through science or philosophy or faith, can bring us closer to something greater? Or do you think it just shows us how small and insignificant we really are? Elon's gaze softened. I think it's both, he said. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. It's humbling, really. But at the same time, I think that's where we find meaning, by pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible, by reaching for something beyond ourselves. In a way, it's a kind of spiritual pursuit. We're all searching for something, whether it's understanding, progress, or a higher purpose. Evelyn absorbed his words, feeling a shift inside her. She had never thought about faith in this way before. To her, faith had always been about a personal relationship with God, about trusting in His plan and believing that everything happened for a reason. But now, she began to see that faith could also be about looking beyond the visible world, about seeking answers and meaning in ways she had never considered. Maybe faith wasn't just about accepting what you couldn't see. It was also about daring to imagine what might be possible. As the conversation continued, Elon shifted the topic towards something he knew well, space exploration. His eyes lit up with enthusiasm as he spoke about SpaceX's mission to colonize Mars and humanity's potential to become an interplanetary species. You know, he said, leaning forward, I think a lot of people view space exploration as just another scientific endeavor. But to me, it's about something bigger. It's about the survival of our species, yes, but it's also about understanding our place in the universe. The more we explore, the more we realize how insignificant we are on the cosmic scale. And yet, at the same time, there's something deeply humbling about that. The fact that we, as humans, can even ask these questions, can dream about the future. We're part of something much larger than ourselves. Evelyn listened intently, captivated by his passion. She had always been curious about space, about the stars, but her faith had never led her to see space exploration in quite the same light. For her, the universe had always been something that pointed to a creator, a vast, intricate design that spoke of God's power and wisdom. But hearing Elon speak about it, she began to see space not just as a reflection of divine creation, but also as a mirror of human ambition, a desire to reach beyond our limits, to understand the unknown. I've never thought about it that way, Evelyn admitted, her voice quiet. "I've always seen space as a testament to God's greatness. But you're right. Maybe it's also a reflection of our own desire to make sense of the world, to understand our place in the grand scheme of things." Elon smiled, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I think that's what makes us human, the fact that we look up at the stars and wonder. We might never know all the answers, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying to find them. And who knows, maybe in the process, we'll find something even more profound than we ever imagined." As the evening wore on, the conversation between Elon and Evelyn continued to deepen, each moment offering new insights and perspectives. They talked about the nature of belief, about the intersection of science and spirituality, and about the mysterious forces that govern the universe. Evelyn, with her lifetime of questions, and Elon, with his relentless pursuit of the unknown, seemed to find a strange harmony between them, two seekers on separate paths, yet both searching for the same thing: understanding. For Evelyn, this meeting had become more than just a conversation with a tech mogul. It had become a journey that bridged the gap between her faith and the wider world of science, technology, and the unknown. And while she didn't have all the answers yet, she felt something stirring within her. A renewed sense of wonder, a desire to keep searching, to keep asking the tough questions, and to embrace the mystery of it all. As she left the conference room that evening, Evelyn felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew this conversation with Elon had sparked something inside her, a willingness to look beyond the limits of what she thought she understood and embrace the uncertainty, the questions, and the search for meaning. The sun had fully set, and the Tesla campus was now bathed in the soft, ambient glow of artificial light. As Evelyn walked toward the exit, her mind was still reeling from the conversation with Elon. There had been something strangely comforting about hearing him speak so openly about his own doubts and uncertainties. It made him more human in her eyes. No longer was he just the brilliant tech mogul with his eye on Mars. He was someone struggling, like everyone else, to make sense of the vast and often contradictory forces shaping the world. Her feet carried her to the sleek, modern lobby, where sleek metal and glass reflected her tired face. She stood still for a moment, leaning against one of the walls, trying to ground herself. What had just happened? How had a conversation about God and space exploration unraveled so much within her? The question lingered in her mind. What if the answers don't come? Elon had seemed at peace with uncertainty, with the unknown. But Evelyn wasn't sure she could be. For decades, she had lived her life tethered to faith, to the belief that God was a constant, an answer to the world's greatest questions. But here, with Elon, the walls of certainty had started to crumble. She now saw that it was not just about accepting the answers she had always known. It was about evolving in her understanding. It was about learning to live in the discomfort of not having every answer neatly tied up in a bow. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from her phone. She glanced down and saw a text message from her daughter, Claire. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Anything you want to talk about?" Evelyn smiled softly, her heart warmed by the simple gesture. Claire had always been the kind of daughter who noticed when something was off, even from miles away. And right now, Evelyn did feel a little off, caught between the past she had known and the new thoughts and uncertainties that had opened up before her. She quickly typed back, "I'm okay, just thinking a lot. I'll tell you about it soon. Love you." Claire's reply came immediately. "Love you too, Mom. Always here if you need me." Evelyn felt a twinge of gratitude. Family had always been her anchor, and Claire, her only daughter, was her greatest source of love and stability. Yet, as much as she loved Claire, Evelyn knew that the questions she was grappling with now were too deep, too complex, to be easily explained over the phone. They weren't questions about work or family, or even the practicalities of life. They were existential. They were about God, about purpose, about the meaning of all the things she had spent her life trying to understand. The drive home was quiet. The city lights blurred past her as Evelyn's car hummed down the freeway. She wasn't quite sure what had shifted inside her during her time with Elon, but she could feel something was different. She felt a longing now, a thirst for more answers that she wasn't sure would come. And at the same time, she felt a strange peace in that uncertainty, a peace she hadn't felt before. She thought back to what Elon had said about humanity's need to keep asking questions, even when answers eluded them. It reminded her of something her grandmother had once told her. The best questions are the ones that never get fully answered. They keep you searching, keep you alive. That had always made sense to her when she was younger, but now it felt deeper. The weight of it settled in her chest. Maybe the search itself was sacred. The seeking, the questioning, the wondering. It was all part of something larger. When she arrived home, Evelyn went straight to the kitchen, where a fresh pot of coffee awaited her. It was the small comforts, coffee, soft lights, the hum of home, that made her feel grounded. She sat down at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around the warm mug, and thought about Elon again. His calm demeanor had challenged her in unexpected ways. He wasn't like the preachers or teachers she had known in her life, those who spoke of faith in definitive, absolute terms. Elon was not a man of religion, not in the traditional sense, and yet, in his own way, he seemed to embody the same kind of deep, restless searching she had always felt. Only, instead of looking for answers in prayer and scripture, he looked to the stars. He reached for the unknown in the world of science and technology. And yet, that was what connected them. They were both searching, asking the same big questions, albeit from different angles. But then came another thought. If the answers don't come, is there peace in the search itself? That thought was unsettling. Evelyn had spent her life thinking there was a final destination to reach, a moment when everything would make sense, when all the chaos would be explained. But now, she wasn't so sure. Maybe the search was the destination. Maybe living with the questions was the point. Later that evening, as Evelyn sat on the couch flipping through a book, her eyes landed on the old box in the corner of the living room. The box had been tucked away for months, since George's passing. The contents were his, the letters, photographs, and mementos of their life together. Evelyn had never been able to go through it. Not until now. Curious and strangely calm, she stood up and walked over to the box. She opened it slowly, the familiar scent of paper and ink hitting her. Her fingers gently brushed over the items inside. An old photograph of them on their honeymoon, a ticket stub from their first concert together, a handwritten note from George, dated just a few months before he died. She pulled out the letter and began reading it, her heart clenching at the familiar handwriting. My dearest Evelyn, I know I don't say this often enough, but you are the light of my life. I often wonder, as we grow older, what it is that binds us together, why I'm so drawn to you, even in the quietest moments. I think about our time together and wonder about the bigger picture. What is the point of all this? I think I've always believed in God, but lately, I've been struggling with some questions. Do we live because we're supposed to? Are we part of a bigger plan? Or is it just chance? Sometimes I look at the stars and feel as small as a speck of dust, but I know somehow that my love for you is as big as the universe itself. And I wonder, is that what matters? I don't know what the answers are, but I'm glad I'm with you, in this life and whatever comes next. Whatever the future holds, I will always love you, now and forever. Yours always, George. The words hit her harder than she expected. It was as though George had been sitting there beside her, sharing in the very questions she had been grappling with today. He had struggled with the same doubts, the same uncertainties about faith and meaning. But in the end, he had settled on love, love for her, love for life, love for the questions themselves. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she finished reading the letter. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what would come next. But she did know this. Love had always been at the heart of it all. And maybe that, in itself, was the answer. The following morning, Evelyn awoke with a strange sense of clarity, as if the night had unraveled something deep within her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the letter from George had shifted something in her, had illuminated a path she hadn't seen before. In the quiet of her kitchen, as she sipped her coffee, Evelyn felt like she was standing at the crossroads of something new, something unexplored. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew she had to keep going, keep asking, and keep learning. The world outside her window felt alive with possibility. For so long, she had lived in the steady rhythm of her daily routines, finding comfort in the predictable patterns of life. But now, Everything seemed to be opening up, as if the very fabric of reality was made of questions, of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. And at the heart of it all, she could feel the presence of love. George's love, Elon's passion for exploration, her own undying love for her family and her faith. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt like she wasn't alone in her search for meaning. She wasn't just looking for answers, she was part of a larger conversation, one that stretched across time and space, from the depths of human history to the farthest reaches of the stars. It had been a week since her conversation with Elon, and Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about it. She had spent hours reflecting on their discussion, especially about the concept of uncertainty, the idea that maybe life wasn't about having all the answers, but rather about being comfortable with the unknown, about continuing to push forward despite the chaos. It had felt liberating, in a way, to hear Elon speak so openly about his own doubts and uncertainties, and it had made her realize that even the most brilliant minds were still searching, still asking, still wondering. So when Elon had invited her to visit the SpaceX headquarters for a private tour, she couldn't say no. It felt like the perfect opportunity to explore her thoughts further, to see for herself the kind of environment that had shaped Elon's worldview. What did it look like when uncertainty and ambition collided in the realm of space exploration? They walked through the high-tech campus, with Elon offering insights into the various projects they were working on, from the development of reusable rockets to the ambitious plans for Mars colonization. Evelyn was both awestruck and humbled by the scale of what she was witnessing. It was one thing to read about these innovations in the news, but to see them up close, to hear Elon's excitement about the future, was something entirely different. At one point, they stood in front of a massive rocket poised for launch. Elon looked up at it with a sense of reverence, as though it were not just a machine, but a symbol of humanity's desire to transcend its limits. "You know, Evelyn," Elon said, turning to her, "there's something incredible about looking up at a rocket like this. It represents so much more than just technology. It's a symbol of our collective ambition, our desire to push beyond the known, to reach for something greater. But there's always that element of risk, that element of uncertainty. We don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we still try. We still push forward." Evelyn nodded slowly, her mind racing. Push forward. That was what she had been doing her whole life. Whether it was in her faith, in her relationships, or in her search for meaning, there had always been uncertainty. There had always been doubt. But she had kept moving, kept searching, because there was something worth striving for. "I think that's what I'm learning," she said softly, "that the uncertainty isn't something to fear. It's part of the journey." Elon smiled knowingly. "Exactly. And in a way, it's the uncertainty that makes it all worth it. If we knew exactly what was going to happen, it wouldn't be an adventure. It wouldn't be meaningful." They walked through the facility, discussing everything from space travel to artificial intelligence, and along the way, Evelyn began to see the world through a new lens. It wasn't just about faith or technology, it was about the intersection of both, about how each could help us navigate the uncertainties of life, how both could coexist to push humanity forward. In the midst of all the unknowns, there was a kind of beauty in the pursuit, in the quest for knowledge and understanding. Later that day, as the tour came to a close, Elon invited Evelyn to join him for a casual lunch at a small cafe nearby. It was a quiet spot, a little off the beaten path, and the atmosphere felt more personal, less like a meeting and more like a conversation between old friends. Over lunch, their conversation turned once again to the topic of faith and purpose. "You know," Elon said, sipping his water, "when I think about the future of humanity, when I think about all the advancements we're making in space and technology, I can't help but wonder what our purpose really is. Are we just here to innovate, to solve problems, to build things? Or is there something deeper to our existence? Something beyond all this?" Evelyn paused, reflecting on his words. She had been asking herself the same question ever since their last conversation. What is our purpose? "I think," she said slowly, "that our purpose is to seek, to ask the big questions, to push the boundaries of what we know, and to try to understand the world and the universe in all its complexity. But I also think our purpose is to love, to connect, and to make meaning out of all of it. That's what gives life depth, even when the answers don't come." Elon looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight smile, he nodded. I think you're right. Maybe that's the real question. Not what's out there in the stars, but how we make sense of it all here, and how we live with the unknown. That evening, as Evelyn sat in her car, heading back to her hotel, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She wasn't afraid of the questions. In fact, she welcomed them now, understanding that it was in the search itself, in the act of asking, that she found meaning. Her conversation with Elon had opened something in her, something she hadn't realized had been closed off for years. It was as though the door to a new world had been unlocked, one where uncertainty wasn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced. And that, Evelyn thought, was where true growth happened, when you stopped clinging to the answers and started living fully in the questions. As she gazed out of the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Evelyn knew that she was on the cusp of something new. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would, but she was learning to live with the uncertainty, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside her after her visit to SpaceX. She had come to California searching for answers, for some kind of resolution about her faith, her doubts, and her place in the grand tapestry of life. Instead, she had found a question that seemed to ripple out into every corner of her mind. It was the same question she had been wrestling with for years, but now, it felt different. It wasn't just about what she believed anymore. It was about why she believed. Sitting in her hotel room that evening, she stared at her reflection in the window, watching the night settle in over the city. The skyline stretched before her, a jagged array of lights twinkling in the distance. The night felt alive, full of energy and possibility, and yet, inside, she was still processing the enormity of everything she had just experienced. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Claire. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How's everything going? I know you're probably processing a lot, but I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. Can't wait to hear about your trip. Evelyn smiled softly, feeling the warmth of her daughter's words. Claire was always so perceptive, so in tune with her emotions. Evelyn had raised her as a single mother after George passed, and the bond they shared was unbreakable. In many ways, Claire was Evelyn's grounding force, the one person who always seemed to understand her without needing to say much. But tonight, Evelyn felt like the roles were starting to shift. It wasn't Claire who needed comforting, it was her. With a deep breath, Evelyn began typing her response. It's been eye-opening, Claire. I've been having some pretty deep conversations. There's a lot to think about. I'm starting to realize that maybe I've been looking for answers in all the wrong places. Or maybe the answers don't matter as much as I thought. She paused before hitting send. She didn't want to burden Claire with her confusion, but at the same time, she wanted to share the weight of it. The feeling of having the ground beneath her shift in ways she wasn't prepared for. Her phone dinged with Claire's reply almost immediately. I get it. You've always been the one who had all the answers. But I think you've taught me that it's okay not to know. You've always said that life's about the journey, not the destination. Maybe you're just living that now. I'm proud of you, Mom. Take your time. I'm here whenever you want to talk. Evelyn's heart swelled with love. She couldn't help but feel a little teary-eyed at her daughter's words. Maybe the answers didn't matter as much as she thought. Maybe it was okay to be lost for a while, to not have everything figured out. Before sending a final response, she set her phone down and let the silence wash over her. The words from her daughter resonated deep within her soul, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn allowed herself to sit in the discomfort of not knowing. It was okay. It was okay not to have all the answers. The following day, Evelyn had one final meeting scheduled before her flight back home. She had arranged to meet with Elon again, this time to discuss something more personal, something that had been on her mind ever since their conversation about faith. When she arrived at his office, Elon greeted her warmly, as always. His office was minimalist, filled with sleek furniture and a few personal items, mostly books, a couple of photos, and an assortment of model rockets. The space felt like a perfect reflection of Elon himself, sharp, modern, and yet still deeply human in its simplicity. I'm glad you could make it, he said, gesturing for her to sit. I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, and I wanted to follow up with you. Evelyn nodded. I've been thinking about it, too, more than I expected. And I have to admit, I'm struggling a little. Not with what you said, but with how it makes me feel. I've spent so much of my life seeking answers. And now, I'm realizing that maybe the answers don't come in the way I thought they would. Elon leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. That's the thing, Evelyn. The answers aren't always clear. But that doesn't mean we stop searching. It means we find meaning in the journey itself, in the questions, in the pursuit. Evelyn hesitated. She knew Elon was right. But there was something deeper, something more visceral, that still unsettled her. What if there was no end to the search? What if the pursuit itself was all there was? There's something I've been struggling with, she said slowly, her voice betraying a rare vulnerability. All my life, I've believed in God, in the idea that there's a higher power, a purpose behind everything. But now, I'm not so sure, and it scares me. What if everything I've believed in doesn't hold up in the face of all these new questions? Elon studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he spoke in a tone that was unexpectedly gentle. I think you're not alone in that, Evelyn. The world is full of people who are searching for meaning, who are questioning their faith, their beliefs, and their place in the universe. I've asked myself some of the same questions, but I've come to realize something. It's not the certainty that matters. It's the faith that comes with not knowing. Evelyn looked at him, her brow furrowed. Faith in what? In the process, Elon said, his voice calm yet firm. Faith that the search itself has value. Faith that the struggle, the questioning, the pursuit, it all adds up to something. Even if we don't have all the answers, even if we never get them. There was a long silence between them, and for the first time, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. Elon's words weren't the kind of answers she had been looking for. They weren't concrete, but they were real, grounded in a shared human experience of seeking and striving. Maybe that was enough. As Evelyn left the SpaceX campus later that day, she felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She still didn't have all the answers, but she didn't need them anymore. The search itself, her search, Elon's search, humanity's search, was what mattered most. The questions were the point. The uncertainty was part of the journey. On the drive back to the airport, she thought about George, about his letter, his struggles, and the love he had given her. She thought about Claire, and how proud she was of her daughter for understanding, even when Evelyn herself didn't. And in that moment, Evelyn realized that perhaps the real truth was this. We are not meant to know everything. Life, faith, and purpose were all things that existed in the space between knowing and not knowing. They lived in the mystery, in the uncertainty, in the questions. And that, Evelyn thought with a smile, was the beauty of it all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Evelyn sat quietly in her seat on the flight back to New York, the hum of the airplane engines a soothing backdrop to her swirling thoughts. Her mind kept circling back to the conversation she had had with Elon and the quiet epiphany that had unfolded within her. Faith wasn't about having all the answers. It wasn't about certainty. It was about trust, trusting the process, trusting the unknown, and trusting that there was meaning to be found in the questions, even when they didn't have easy answers. As the plane descended toward the sprawling city below, Evelyn felt an unexpected calm wash over her. She had left SpaceX filled with more questions than when she had arrived, but somehow, she felt lighter. Maybe the journey was the point, she thought. She didn't need to have everything figured out right now. She just needed to keep asking, keep seeking, and trust that the answers would reveal themselves when the time was right. The moment Evelyn stepped off the plane and into the cool New York air, she felt the comforting weight of home. There was something about the city, the noise, the chaos, the energy, that always made her feel grounded. She had lived here for years, ever since she and George had moved to the city to build their life together. And while the city had changed over the years, so had she. She made her way through the crowded terminal, weaving in and out of travelers, her mind still on the conversation with Elon. She felt like she had crossed an invisible threshold, like the person who had left for California was no longer the person who was coming home. And then she saw her, Claire, waiting at the gate with her signature smile, her arms outstretched as if to say, "I'm here, and I'm proud of you." Evelyn's heart swelled with emotion as she wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her tight. There was so much she wanted to say, so much to share, but for a moment, words didn't feel necessary. The two of them stood there, just holding each other in the familiar bustle of the airport, letting the silence speak for itself. Later that evening, Evelyn and Claire sat across from each other at the kitchen table, a warm meal spread before them. Claire was eager to hear about Evelyn's trip, to know what she had learned and how she had felt meeting Elon Musk. Evelyn had been eager to share, too, but there was something that had been weighing on her heart, something she had been hesitant to say out loud. "Mom," Claire said, her voice soft as she set her fork down, "you've seemed different since you got back. More peaceful, maybe? Like there's something new inside you. What happened?" Evelyn smiled, her eyes searching her daughter's face for a moment before answering. "I met someone," she began, her voice a little tentative. "Someone who made me question everything I thought I knew. And at first, I was unsettled. But now, I think I'm starting to understand that it's okay to not have all the answers. Maybe it's more about the search, the asking, than the answers themselves." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. "I think I get that. I think. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in wanting everything figured out, but maybe life isn't about having it all planned. Maybe it's about trusting the path you're on, even when you can't see where it leads." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat at her daughter's words. How did Claire understand all of this so clearly? Evelyn had spent years wrestling with these questions, and yet here was her daughter, wise beyond her years, offering her the kind of insight that only came through lived experience. "Yeah," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe it's about trusting and believing that we're on the right path, even when we don't know exactly where it leads." That evening, as Evelyn prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on something Elon had said: "Faith is not about certainty, but trust in the process." It was a simple concept, but one that had completely reshaped the way she saw her life. For years, Evelyn had held on to the idea that faith required absolute certainty, that faith was about knowing, about having all the answers. But now, she realized that faith was about taking a leap into the unknown, trusting that no matter where the journey took her, she would be okay. Evelyn thought about George again. She thought about his unwavering belief, his deep connection to God, and how that had shaped their life together. George had always believed that life was a journey of discovery, a series of moments where faith and trust intersected. Even as his health had deteriorated, even as their future had seemed uncertain, he had never wavered in his belief that God was with them, that the journey itself was meaningful. And now, Evelyn realized, she was finally ready to take that leap herself. As she lay in bed, the soft hum of the city outside her window, Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. It was simple, but it came from her heart. "God, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the future holds, but I trust you. I trust the journey." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the next day, or the day after that. But for the first time in a long while, that was okay. The uncertainty didn't scare her anymore. It felt like an invitation to step forward, to trust in something greater than herself, and to embrace the unknown. The next morning, Evelyn woke early, as she always did. The city was still quiet, and the light outside her window was soft, golden, as if the world itself was waking up in anticipation. She stretched, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had made peace with the unknown, with the uncertainties of life. And as she looked out the window at the skyline, she felt an overwhelming sense of hope. The city below her was full of people, all of them walking their own paths, facing their own struggles, and asking their own questions. But they were doing it together, each person taking their own leap of faith, trusting that they were on the right path, even when they couldn't see the end of it. Evelyn smiled to herself. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Take the leap, trust the journey, and believe that, in the end, it will all make sense. As the day unfolded, Evelyn moved through the motions of her life, grocery shopping, catching up with friends, taking a walk in the park, but everything felt different. There was a quiet sense of purpose in her actions, a sense of peace that had come from within. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid of the questions, of the uncertainty, or of what the future might bring. She was exactly where she needed to be. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Evelyn had always prided herself on being in control. For years, she had been the pillar of strength for her family, the steady presence that guided Claire through the ups and downs of life. After George passed, Evelyn had taken it upon herself to be the anchor, not just for Claire, but for herself as well. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart. There was always something to do, someone to care for. She was the fixer, the problem solver, the one who knew how to keep things together. But now, after everything she had experienced, the conversations with Elon, the introspection about faith, the realization that life was full of questions without easy answers, Evelyn found herself feeling something she hadn't in a long time: vulnerable. The day after she returned from California, she found herself walking along the familiar streets of her neighborhood, her mind still buzzing with the revelations she had come to terms with. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and the trees that lined the streets were shedding their golden leaves, creating a beautiful carpet of color beneath her feet. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something larger than herself was guiding her. She had never considered herself to be spiritual in the traditional sense, at least, not in the way that George had been. He had believed in God with a certainty that seemed almost unshakable. But Evelyn had always been more pragmatic. She had questioned, doubted, and at times, outright resisted the idea of a higher power. Yet, after her conversations with Elon, and the journey she had begun to take inwardly, she found herself open to the idea of something beyond the physical world. She didn't need a specific answer, but she was starting to see the subtle forces at play in her life, the quiet, invisible threads that connected moments, people, and experiences in ways she couldn't always understand. It was as if something, or someone, was whispering to her in the stillness, urging her to keep moving forward, even when the path wasn't clear. As she passed the old bookstore that had been in the neighborhood for as long as she could remember, Evelyn paused. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. The scent of old paper and leather-bound books filled her senses, and she immediately felt the comforting embrace of nostalgia. She had spent many afternoons here in her younger days, browsing the aisles, searching for answers in the pages of novels and philosophy books. The store owner, a gray-haired man with a gentle smile, looked up as she entered. "Evelyn, it's been a while," he said warmly. "What brings you in today?" "I was just passing by and thought I'd come in," she replied, her voice soft. She wasn't sure what had drawn her inside, but something felt right about it. The familiar surroundings, the quiet atmosphere. It was the perfect place for reflection. "Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, his eyes twinkling as if he already knew the answer. Evelyn hesitated. "Not really. Just browsing, I guess. It's funny. I used to come here all the time when I was younger, but now it feels like I'm looking for something else. Something more deeper, I suppose." The man nodded knowingly. "I think a lot of people are looking for something deeper these days. You're not alone in that." Evelyn smiled faintly, wondering if he could see through her like a window. She didn't need to explain herself. He seemed to understand more than words could convey. After a few minutes of browsing, her eyes were drawn to a small, worn book on one of the shelves. It was unassuming, tucked between two other, larger volumes. The Unseen Forces, Life Beyond the Physical. Evelyn pulled it from the shelf, intrigued by the title. She had no idea what it was about, but something about it felt significant. She flipped it open to the first page and began reading. The words on the page seemed to speak directly to her, as though they had been waiting for her to find them. It was a mixture of philosophy, spiritual teachings, and personal reflections on the unseen forces that guide our lives. The more she read, the more she felt a quiet pull in her chest, a sense that this book was part of the puzzle she had been putting together since her conversation with Elon. She didn't need to understand all the details yet, but she could feel the familiar, yet unfamiliar, truth of it. It wasn't about having clear answers, but about recognizing that something bigger than herself was at play. Something that moved through every person, every encounter, every moment. That night, as Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with the book open before her, she found herself thinking back to the letter George had left for her. She hadn't read it in months, hadn't needed to, but now, after everything she had learned, after the questions and doubts that had surfaced, the letter felt different. She pulled it from the drawer where she had tucked it away and unfolded the familiar yellowed pages. It was the last letter George had written before he passed, and though she had read it countless times, she had never fully understood the depth of it until now. The words were simple, but they held so much more weight than she had ever realized. My dearest Evelyn, I know this letter may come as a surprise, but I wanted to share something with you before my time here is through. I've always believed in the power of God, in the unseen forces that guide us, even in our darkest moments. But I've come to realize that those forces are not just something outside of us, they are part of us. They are in our hearts, in our souls, and in the people we meet along the way. We are never truly alone. Even when we can't see it, there is a plan unfolding before us. I want you to remember this, Evelyn. Life is a journey of discovery. You've always been my anchor, the one who held us together. But now, I need you to trust in something greater than yourself. Trust that the love we shared will guide you, even after I'm gone. Trust that you are not alone. Evelyn wiped away a tear as she finished reading the letter, her heart heavy but full at the same time. She had never fully understood what George had meant when he spoke of these unseen forces. But now, reading those words again, she realized that he hadn't been talking about something distant or intangible. He had been talking about love, about the deep, invisible connection that binds people together, that moves through the world in ways we can't always comprehend, but which is always there. The following days felt like a gentle unfolding. Evelyn found herself embracing life with a new perspective, one where she allowed the unseen forces, the quiet whispers, the subtle connections, the feelings that couldn't be explained, to guide her forward. She no longer felt like she had to control everything or have all the answers. She was learning to trust the process. One afternoon, as she and Claire sat together in the park, Claire noticed the change in her mother. "You seem lighter, Mom," she said, her voice warm with curiosity. Evelyn smiled. "I am. I think I'm finally starting to understand something I didn't before. It's about trusting the unknown, trusting that we don't have to have everything figured out, that life, with all its questions and struggles, is still beautiful, still meaningful, even in the uncertainty." Claire looked at her mother, her eyes soft with understanding. "I think you're right. I think sometimes we're too focused on the end goal, when really, it's the journey that matters most." Evelyn nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. There was still much to discover, much to question, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was learning to trust the unseen forces, the love, the connections, and the mysterious threads of life that held everything together. Evelyn woke up that morning with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The light streaming through the window felt different, warmer, softer, as if the universe itself was giving her a little nudge. She had spent the last few weeks reflecting on her journey, trying to make sense of everything she had learned. The unseen forces, the power of trust, faith without certainty. Her world felt quieter now, but in the best way. No longer was she rushing to fill the space with noise, with distractions. She was learning to sit with the stillness, to let life unfold at its own pace. And in that stillness, she began to notice the small things. The way the sun cast shadows on the floor, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty hallways, the way Claire's laughter could light up an entire room. But there was still something missing. A sense that she hadn't fully acted on everything she had been reflecting on. There was something more she needed to do, something that would deepen the lessons she was learning. It wasn't enough to just understand. She had to live it. That afternoon, as Evelyn sipped tea in her cozy living room, Claire walked in, holding an envelope. It was thick, official-looking. "Mom, you got a letter from SpaceX," she said, raising an eyebrow. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anything from them. After her visit to the SpaceX headquarters, she thought the conversation had been a one-time thing. But now, here was this letter. She took it from Claire with trembling hands and opened it. To her surprise, it was an invitation. An opportunity to collaborate with SpaceX on an outreach project designed to inspire young people to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics (STEM). The letter explained that Elon had personally recommended her after their meeting, impressed by her ability to connect with people and see the bigger picture. They wanted her to be a part of a special initiative that aimed to help young people, especially from underserved communities, realize their potential and ignite their curiosity about space and science. Evelyn blinked, momentarily stunned. Was this real? The old Evelyn would have felt a rush of excitement, a need to seize the opportunity immediately, to prove something to herself, to others. But the woman who sat before the letter now was different. She didn't feel the same urgency. She didn't feel the need to jump into action just for the sake of doing something. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. What did this truly mean for her? Evelyn sat for a long time, thinking about the journey she had been on. How much had changed in such a short time? She had never imagined that meeting Elon Musk, of all people, would lead to this moment. But here she was, holding an invitation that could change the course of her life, and maybe even the lives of countless young people. She thought about George again. If he were here, he would tell her to follow her heart, to trust that the right opportunity would always find her when she was ready. But Evelyn wasn't entirely sure she was ready. After all, she had spent so much of her life feeling like she had to have everything figured out. This opportunity was large, overwhelming, and, in some ways, frightening. It would require more from her than she had ever given before. And yet, the more she thought about it, the more she felt a sense of clarity. This was not just about her. This wasn't about proving herself or chasing some goal for recognition. This was an opportunity to give back, to share the lessons she had learned in the most meaningful way possible. And in that sense, it felt like a calling. She picked up the phone and called Claire into the room. "Mom, what's up?" Claire asked, sitting down next to her. "I got an invitation," Evelyn said, her voice a little unsteady. "From SpaceX. They want me to be a part of this initiative to inspire young people in STEM. It's a big project, and I don't know if I'm ready for it. But it feels important, like something I need to do." Claire looked at her with an expression of quiet pride. "Mom, you've been ready for this. I can see it. You've spent your whole life helping people, lifting them up. This is just the next step in that journey. You don't have to have all the answers. Just take the leap." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. Her daughter had learned something important, too. Claire had always been wise, but this new level of understanding she was seeing in her daughter was something different. It felt like they were on the same path now, one that wasn't about certainty or control, but about trust and faith in the journey. Evelyn picked up the phone, dialed the number on the letter, and accepted the invitation. The first day of the initiative was overwhelming. Evelyn found herself in a room filled with passionate individuals, all working toward the same goal, to inspire and empower young people to reach for the stars. It was a beautiful thing, seeing so many different people with the same shared mission. But Evelyn felt like an outsider, unsure of her place in this grand initiative. Everyone seemed so much more experienced, so much more comfortable in their roles. She questioned whether she had anything to offer. But then, she remembered Elon's words. Faith is about trusting the process. As the day unfolded, she found herself interacting with the young participants, asking questions, encouraging them to think big and dream even bigger. She was amazed by their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and the way their eyes lit up when they spoke about space, technology, and the future. These kids were full of wonder, full of potential, and Evelyn realized that in those moments, she had something to offer after all, not as an expert in the field of space exploration, but as someone who could guide them through the process of discovering their own paths, their own potential. By the end of the day, Evelyn felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. She wasn't just participating in a project. She was a part of something much bigger. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought back to that moment when she had received the invitation. She had almost said no, almost walked away from the opportunity out of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But instead, she had stepped into the unknown, trusting that the next step would reveal itself when she was ready. And now, here she was, part of a ripple effect that would reach beyond her, beyond the kids she was working with, into the future itself. Her journey wasn't just about her own growth anymore. It was about touching lives, inspiring others, and creating a legacy that would last long after she was gone. The weeks went by quickly. Evelyn found herself more and more involved in the project, working closely with young people, mentors, and innovators. The work was demanding but fulfilling in ways she hadn't anticipated. And as the program grew, so did Evelyn's understanding of herself and the role she was playing in the lives of these young people. One day, as she was leaving the SpaceX headquarters after a long day of meetings, a young woman approached her. She was a high school senior, full of enthusiasm and ideas. "Ms. Evelyn?" the girl asked shyly. "I just wanted to thank you. You really inspired me today. I used to think that science wasn't for me, that I wasn't smart enough. But hearing you talk about faith in the unknown, it made me think that maybe I can do it after all. Maybe I can become an engineer, or even an astronaut. I just wanted you to know that you really made a difference." Evelyn was taken aback, her heart swelling with emotion. The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. She had no idea that her words had resonated so deeply with this young woman. It was a moment of clarity, a confirmation that this was why she was here. Her voice shook slightly as she replied, "You can do anything you set your mind to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I believe in you." The young woman smiled brightly and walked away, and Evelyn watched her go, feeling the ripple effect of the work she was doing. This was it. This was the purpose she had been seeking all along. Evelyn had always prided herself on being pragmatic, grounded in reality. The world of space exploration and high-tech innovation was so far removed from her day-to-day life. Yet here she was, in the thick of it, interacting with young minds whose dreams spanned galaxies. Every day, she learned more about the vastness of their potential and the significance of what she was doing. But with every new experience, she felt the weight of her own doubts creeping in. Was she truly making a difference? Could one person really change the course of someone's life, especially when the stakes felt so high? And, most importantly, what did it all mean in the grander scheme of things? These questions gnawed at her, even as she saw firsthand the impact of her work. One evening, after a particularly long and exhausting day of mentoring, Evelyn received an unexpected call. It was from Elon Musk's office. "Good evening, Ms. Dawson," the voice on the other end of the line said. "Elon would like to meet with you again. He's interested in discussing your continued involvement with the project and possibly expanding your role. Would you be available for a meeting tomorrow?" Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to be asked back into Elon's orbit, not after their initial conversation. She had been so absorbed in the work of the outreach program that she had put thoughts of Elon and SpaceX out of her mind. "Of course," she replied, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "I'll make time." The meeting was set for the next morning at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Evelyn barely slept the night before, her mind racing with possibilities. What did Elon want? Why was he interested in working with her again? The next day, Evelyn stepped into the sleek, modern SpaceX headquarters with a mixture of awe and anxiety. It had been months since her last visit, and the buzz of activity inside the building still overwhelmed her. There were engineers and technicians everywhere, a whirlwind of productivity that seemed to vibrate through the air. Elon Musk greeted her warmly as she entered his office. He was standing by a whiteboard, scribbling equations and diagrams, his mind clearly in motion as always. "Evelyn, it's good to see you again," he said with a smile. "Thanks for coming on such short notice. Please, have a seat." Evelyn sat down, trying not to let her nerves show. Elon had a reputation for being intense, a visionary with an unyielding drive to push boundaries. But she had learned, during their first meeting, that he also had an ability to connect with people in a way that felt surprisingly down to earth. "I've been keeping an eye on the project," Elon began, his voice steady but full of purpose. "And I have to say, I'm impressed with the work you've been doing. You've helped these kids see the future in ways that most adults can't even begin to understand." Evelyn smiled softly, unsure where this was leading. "Thank you, Elon. It's been a privilege to be a part of it. He paused for a moment, staring out the window before turning back to her. That's why I think you're the right person for something bigger. Evelyn's breath caught in her chest. Bigger? What do you mean? He walked to his desk and pulled out a stack of papers, sliding them across the table to her. We're planning a new initiative, one that involves not just mentoring, but creating a space where young people can actually engage with cutting-edge technology, conduct real experiments, and even contribute to projects that are happening here at SpaceX. It's going to be a massive undertaking, but I think you're the perfect fit to lead it. Evelyn blinked. The room seemed to spin. Was he asking her to lead? Elon, I don't know what to say. This is so much. He raised an eyebrow, his expression not entirely serious, but not dismissive either. I'm not asking you to do it all alone, Evelyn, but I believe you have a unique perspective, one that blends mentorship, empathy, and a deep understanding of the importance of vision. I want you to be a guiding force, not just for the kids, but for the whole program. You'll be a bridge between the kids' raw potential and the cutting-edge technology we're developing. Evelyn's mind was racing. This was beyond anything she had imagined. But something inside her clicked. This was the chance she had been waiting for. A chance to truly make an impact, not just as a mentor, but as a catalyst for change. I'll do it, she said, her voice clear, though the weight of her decision hung heavily in the air. Elon smiled, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. I knew you would. And just so you know, I've had a few conversations with some of the higher-ups. This will be a top priority. You'll have all the resources you need. As Evelyn returned to her hotel later that evening, her thoughts were still swirling. She had agreed to take on the role, but the enormity of it hadn't fully sunk in yet. This wasn't just about teaching a lesson or leading a group. This was about creating something that could fundamentally change the future of thousands, maybe millions, of young lives. The next few days felt like a blur. Evelyn had returned to her routine at the outreach program, now with a new sense of purpose, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she could sense that it was going to be full of uncertainty. That night, as she sat in her hotel room, staring out over the glittering lights of the city, she thought back to that conversation with Elon. There was so much she didn't know, so many things that could go wrong. But the one thing she had learned through everything was that uncertainty was a part of the journey. The uncertainty had always scared her, kept her from fully embracing the unknown. But now, with the lessons she had learned from Elon, from her time with the kids, and from the love and loss she had experienced, Evelyn had come to realize that uncertainty didn't have to be something to fear. It was the space in which possibility thrived. A few weeks later, Evelyn stood before a group of students, some nervous, some excited, all of them curious. They were about to participate in the first official experiment of the new initiative, a hands-on project where they would work with SpaceX engineers to design and test prototype technology. Evelyn addressed them, her voice steady but full of passion. You're not here just to learn. You're here to contribute. What you're doing today, isn't just about checking off tasks. It's about creating something real, something that could change the future. And it's not just about technology. It's about the people who believe in the impossible. The room fell silent as the students absorbed her words. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt that deep, familiar sense of belonging. The feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be. This was the unknown she had been waiting for. The first project was a success. The students had come together to build a prototype that, while not perfect, was a true testament to their creativity and determination. And Evelyn watched, with a growing sense of awe, as they celebrated their accomplishment, not just as a team, but as individuals who had taken a leap into the unknown, just as she had. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, surrounded by a group of eager young minds, all buzzing with excitement. It was the second month of the new SpaceX initiative, and the room was alive with energy. These students, some high school seniors, others freshmen in college, had come together with a single mission: to solve real-world problems through technology. Today, they would be working on a challenge set by SpaceX engineers to design a sustainable energy solution for a Martian colony. It wasn't just theoretical work. The project had real-world implications, with the goal of bringing these ideas to life in future space missions. As Evelyn watched the students break into teams, she couldn't help but smile. The same doubt and hesitation she had felt when she first stepped into this role seemed to melt away each time she saw these young people collaborating, imagining, and pushing the boundaries of what they thought was possible. Every day, she was reminded that she wasn't just mentoring them in science and technology. She was showing them how to believe in the possibility of the impossible. Evelyn had always been a teacher at heart, but this new role was stretching her in ways she hadn't expected. As a mentor, she was used to offering advice, guidance, and sometimes tough love. But as a leader in a program this large, she was required to think much bigger. It wasn't just about giving instructions. It was about cultivating an environment where innovation could thrive, where failure was not feared but seen as a stepping stone to success. And failure, it turned out, was a constant companion. In the beginning, the students had struggled with their first prototypes. Parts of their designs failed to work. Systems they had built didn't integrate the way they had imagined, and some of them became discouraged. But instead of stepping in with solutions, Evelyn had done something she wasn't sure she was capable of. She let them wrestle with the problems themselves. One afternoon, after a particularly rough meeting, one of the students, Jason, came up to her, looking frustrated. "Ms. Dawson," he said, "I think we've tried everything. Nothing works. Maybe we should just start over." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice calm. "Jason, think about it. If it's not working, you're just closer to finding the thing that will work. The best solutions don't come easy. You have to be willing to fail over and over again until it clicks. What do you think the first astronauts did when they tried to land on the moon? They didn't succeed on their first attempt." Jason looked up at her, his eyes wide. "You really think we're on the verge of something big?" "I know you are," Evelyn said, her voice filled with quiet conviction, "but only if you're willing to push through the uncertainty. This isn't about getting it right the first time. It's about not giving up when you fail, because that's when the real learning begins." As the months passed, the project began to take shape. The students had overcome their early setbacks, refined their prototypes, and were now working on a final design that would be presented to the SpaceX engineers for review. But Evelyn knew that the biggest transformation wasn't just in the technology they were building. It was in the transformation of the students themselves. She saw the way they spoke to each other now, with confidence, with respect, and with a shared vision. The group of hesitant teenagers who had walked in through the doors months ago had become a team of problem solvers, thinkers, and dreamers. And Evelyn realized something. These students weren't just learning about space. They were learning how to navigate the unknowns of life itself. One afternoon, as she walked through the lab, she overheard a conversation between two of the students, Clara and Noah, who had previously been shy and quiet. Now, they were discussing how they might integrate renewable energy sources into the Martian habitat design. "I was reading about solar power on Mars," Clara was saying, "and there's actually a lot we could do if we use the dust storms to our advantage. They might block the sun, but they also create a sort of natural insulation." Noah nodded. "Yeah, and if we can build a hybrid system using solar and wind energy, we could make the colony self-sustaining, even during those storms." Evelyn paused outside the door, listening in with a growing sense of pride. These kids were dreaming, yes, but they were dreaming with their eyes open, connecting the dots, and thinking through solutions that would have seemed impossible just a few months ago. And yet, as Evelyn marveled at their growth, a part of her couldn't help but wonder, what about her? Being a leader was different from being a mentor. As a mentor, Evelyn had been a guide, but she had never felt the weight of responsibility that she did now. She was making decisions that affected the future of dozens of young lives, and those decisions were not always easy. There were moments when she felt lost, uncertain, and, at times, overwhelmed. One evening, after a long day of meetings with SpaceX's top engineers, Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the project updates on her computer. She was exhausted, physically and mentally, and the pressure was mounting. The initiative had gained attention from several high-profile organizations, and they were beginning to push for faster results. There were discussions about expanding the project to other locations, possibly even internationally. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of responsibility. Her phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Hey, Mom, I know you've been busy, but we haven't had a real conversation in a while. When can we catch up?" I miss you. Evelyn's heart ached. Her relationship with Claire had shifted, too. While Claire was proud of her accomplishments, Evelyn could sense a growing distance between them. She was so absorbed in the work, in the pressure, in the future of this initiative, that she had started to lose sight of the present, the small moments that mattered. Evelyn closed her laptop, stood up, and walked over to the window. The city lights twinkled below her, a vast, unending sea of possibility. It was almost like looking at a reflection of the future, endless, filled with potential, but also overwhelming. How did she navigate this new territory? And then it came to her, the same way the students had learned to navigate their own unknowns. One step at a time, one failure at a time, with courage, with resilience, and with a willingness to embrace uncertainty. The next morning, Evelyn called Claire. It was time to reconnect, time to remind herself of the importance of balance. "Hey, sweetheart," she said as Claire picked up. "I'm sorry I've been so caught up. How about we have dinner tonight, just the two of us? We could catch up, maybe talk about everything. It's been too long." Claire's voice softened. "I'd love that, Mom." As Evelyn hung up the phone, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The work, the projects, the deadlines, they were important. But the relationships, the moments of connection with the people she loved, those were just as important. It was a small step, but it felt like the right one. One step at a time. Evelyn woke early the next morning, feeling unusually refreshed. After her dinner with Claire, a quiet evening of conversation and shared laughter, she had realized just how much she had missed the simplicity of time spent with her daughter. The weight of leadership and the responsibilities of the project had been consuming her in ways she hadn't fully understood until last night. But now, she felt a renewed sense of clarity, both in her role as a leader and in her role as a mother. That morning, as she drove to the SpaceX campus, the sun rising over the horizon, Evelyn reflected on the changes that had come over her. She had seen the impact of her work on the students, how they had grown, not just as engineers and scientists, but as thinkers, as dreamers. They were the future. But she had also seen how the ripple effect of her decisions, her actions, had reached far beyond the walls of the program. The students she had mentored had begun to inspire others, igniting a passion for space exploration and problem-solving that spread to schools across the country. When Evelyn arrived at SpaceX headquarters that morning, she was greeted by one of Elon's assistants. "Ms. Dawson, Elon is expecting you in his office. He's asked for a progress update on the Martian colony project." Evelyn nodded, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and pressure. She had been working closely with the engineers and the students on the prototype, and the project had moved from concept to something tangible, something real. She was anxious to share their progress, but at the same time, she couldn't help but wonder what Elon's thoughts would be. Elon had a way of cutting straight to the heart of the matter, challenging assumptions and pushing for more. She knocked on the door to his office, and a voice called out from within, "Come in." Elon was sitting at his desk, his eyes glued to the screens in front of him. As she entered, he looked up and gave her a nod. "Evelyn, good to see you. How's the team doing?" "They're doing well," Evelyn replied, settling into the chair across from him. "We've hit some bumps along the way, but nothing we couldn't work through. The students are more engaged than ever. We're finalizing the design for the prototype this week." "Good," Elon said, leaning forward slightly. "I've been watching the updates. I have to say, I'm impressed with what you've done. But, as always, I'm curious. What's the next step?" Evelyn hesitated, but only for a moment. "The next step is scaling up. The initial design works, but now we need to refine it, test it under more extreme conditions. We're also looking at ways to integrate renewable energy sources more efficiently, especially in the face of potential challenges on Mars, like the dust storms." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "That's where it gets interesting. But let's talk about something else. What I'm hearing from you, from your team, is not just about solving technical problems. It's about something deeper. You're not just teaching them how to build technology, you're teaching them how to think, how to see the world differently." Evelyn felt a surge of pride. Elon had been right about one thing. It wasn't just about solving technical problems. It was about teaching these kids to be more than problem solvers. It was about showing them how to face the unknowns of life with resilience, creativity, and courage. I've seen it in their work, Evelyn said, her voice growing more animated. These students, especially the ones who were struggling at first, they're not just coming up with answers. They're asking questions. They're challenging the status quo. And that's when the real breakthroughs happen. Elon smiled, a small but approving nod. That's what we need. We're not just training engineers. We're training leaders, innovators, visionaries. As the project progressed, Evelyn found herself more deeply integrated into the wider network of organizations and institutions that had taken an interest in the initiative. Schools from all over the United States had begun to reach out, requesting to collaborate or integrate similar programs into their curricula. The ripple effect of the program was beginning to expand far beyond what she had originally imagined. One afternoon, as she was preparing for a meeting with a group of educators, her phone buzzed with an email from one of the top universities in the country. It was a letter of recommendation for one of the students in the program, Clara, who had been offered a scholarship to a prestigious engineering program. Evelyn read the email, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just Clara's technical skills that were being recognized. It was her ability to think critically, her leadership potential, her ability to inspire others. The scholarship was a direct result of her participation in the SpaceX program. Clara's success was a clear sign that Evelyn's program wasn't just a one-time opportunity for a few kids. It was the start of something bigger. These students were becoming catalysts for change in their communities. They were sharing their experiences, their newfound skills, with younger students, igniting a passion for space exploration, for science, for technology. And soon, Evelyn realized this program would no longer be just hers. It was growing into something much larger. One evening, after the students had left for the day, Evelyn sat in her office, reflecting on how far the program had come. It had started with just a handful of kids, a vision to inspire them to reach for the stars. Now, it was a movement. She had seen firsthand how one spark of curiosity could light a fire that spread across an entire community. But it wasn't just the students who had been changed by this initiative. Evelyn herself had undergone a transformation. She had learned to see leadership not just as a position of authority, but as a responsibility to create a space where others could grow, thrive, and contribute. She had learned to embrace uncertainty, to welcome the unknown, and to understand that true innovation didn't come from having all the answers. It came from the willingness to explore, to question, and to fail. The ripple effect of this program was not just in the students' achievements. It was in the way they were beginning to see the world. It was in the way they would approach challenges in the future, knowing that they were capable of overcoming them, knowing that they had the tools to build something new, something bigger. Evelyn glanced out the window, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The future felt uncertain, as it always had, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to face whatever came next. The next few weeks passed in a blur. There were meetings with potential partners, more university visits to showcase the progress of the Martian colony project, and even media coverage highlighting the successes of Evelyn's students. The program was beginning to take on a life of its own, expanding faster than Evelyn had ever imagined. Yet, despite the rapid growth, she found herself increasingly reflective. The momentary spark of excitement she had felt at the beginning of this journey had begun to fade into a quiet, persistent worry, an undercurrent she couldn't quite ignore. It was a Friday afternoon when the realization hit her, catching her off guard while she was reviewing reports at her desk. She had lost sight of her original purpose. Evelyn had always been driven by the desire to inspire, to help others achieve their potential. She had always believed that, at its core, leadership was about making others believe in themselves. But lately, she had been so caught up in the logistics of expanding the program, securing funding, and managing the growing demand for the initiative that the fundamental, human side of it had started to blur. That evening, after a long week of work, Evelyn decided to take a break. She called Claire, hoping for some mother-daughter time to ground herself. Claire's voice was warm as she picked up. "Hey, Mom, what's going on?" "I've been thinking," Evelyn said, her voice hesitant, "about everything that's been happening. The project, the students, the media attention, it's all moving so fast, and I'm not sure I'm keeping up with it all. I feel like I've lost my way a little." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Claire replied. Mom, I think you're doing something incredible. You've built something that's changing people's lives. But you're right, it's easy to get swept up in the momentum. Maybe it's time to pause and figure out what matters most to you, not just what matters to the project. Evelyn nodded to herself. Of course, Claire was right. The project had become a blur of deadlines, expectations, and accomplishments. But what had truly drawn Evelyn to this mission in the first place wasn't the accolades or the expansion. It was the spark she had seen in her students' eyes, that flicker of potential she was helping to ignite. I think I need to find my way back to that, Evelyn said softly. I need to focus on why I started this in the first place. Take a break, Mom, Claire suggested. You've earned it. I'll be in town next weekend. Maybe we can take a trip, just the two of us? You deserve some time to reconnect, to breathe. Evelyn smiled, grateful for Claire's offer. I'd like that. A weekend getaway sounds perfect. The following week, Evelyn took Claire up on her offer. They rented a cabin in the mountains for the weekend, a place they had visited often during Claire's childhood. The quiet of the forest and the crisp mountain air allowed Evelyn to clear her mind. They hiked, talked, and spent the evenings by the fire, just catching up. During one of their long walks, Claire brought up something that had been on her mind. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. You're teaching these kids to dream big, to think outside the box. But what about your own dreams? Have you had the time to think about what you want out of this whole thing? Evelyn stopped in her tracks, startled by the question. She had been so focused on guiding her students and expanding the project that she hadn't taken time to consider her own dreams. She had a vision for what the program could become, but had she truly taken the time to envision her own future beyond that? I guess I've been so busy making sure everyone else has their chance to shine, Evelyn said, her voice quiet. I haven't really thought about what I want. I guess I just wanted to help others. But now that it's growing so much, I don't know if I've thought about what it means for me. Claire smiled. It's okay, Mom. It's okay to want something for yourself, too. When Evelyn returned from the weekend with Claire, she was determined to get back on track. It wasn't just about achieving bigger and faster results. It was about quality, about making sure the students were still at the center of everything. She started by holding a series of intimate meetings with the students. She wanted to hear their stories, their personal journeys, and how the program had impacted them beyond just their technical skills. She asked questions that went beyond the scope of the project, questions about their dreams, their challenges, and their vision for the future. It was in one of these conversations that Evelyn was reminded of the true power of what they were doing. I used to think space exploration was something only a few special people could do, said Jason, one of the quieter students who had come a long way. But after working on this project, I realized that if we can design something that works for Mars, we can do anything. I never thought I'd be someone who could create something that could change the world. But now, I feel like I can. Evelyn felt a lump in her throat as she listened. This was it. This was why she had started all of this in the first place. The project wasn't just about Mars. It was about changing the way these kids saw themselves, about giving them the tools to see that they could achieve anything they set their minds to. The Martian colony was merely the beginning. The real mission was far bigger. With renewed clarity, Evelyn decided to make a shift in how the program was structured. She would focus less on the expansion and more on deepening the quality of the work the students were doing. They would take on fewer projects, but those they did take on would be more meaningful, more impactful. The goal would be to prioritize hands-on, real-world applications of their work, making sure every student had the opportunity to dive into the complexities of the challenges they faced. Evelyn also made a point to reconnect with her team, reminding them that, while their work was groundbreaking, it was their relationships, both with each other and with the students, that would ultimately define the program's success. She wanted them to remember why they were there, to inspire, to teach, and to empower the next generation of thinkers and innovators. One afternoon, as she sat in her office reviewing some of the latest student reports, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the long road she had traveled. It had been a journey of growth, not just for the students, but for herself. She thought about how, in the beginning, she had been so focused on building something big that she hadn't stopped to think about the real impact of what she was doing. But now, she understood. The work wasn't about creating a massive, widespread program that reached as many people as possible. It was about creating lasting, meaningful change in the lives of the students who participated, one by one. As the program continued to grow, Evelyn's leadership had to evolve, too. She had to shift from being a manager of growth to being a steward of quality. The work of inspiring the next generation of leaders had to come from a place of understanding, of empathy, and of patience. It wasn't about pushing for bigger results, but about pushing for deeper results. And in that moment, Evelyn realized something she hadn't fully understood before. True leadership is not about being in control of the future. It's about guiding others to take control of their own. As the weeks passed, the program continued to evolve. Evelyn's shift in perspective had brought about a subtle yet powerful change in the way the students interacted with the curriculum, with each other, and with their mentors. There was a renewed sense of purpose in the air, one that felt more grounded, more personal, and more connected to the human side of their work. The students no longer viewed the Martian colony project as an abstract ambition. It had become something deeply personal. Their involvement felt like a way to leave a legacy, a piece of themselves that would eventually reach beyond Earth into the unknown. But as the program's reach grew, so did the pressure. More universities, more corporate sponsors, and even international schools were showing interest. It was exhilarating, of course, but Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that things were starting to move faster than she could keep up with. Every new partnership, every new opportunity to expand the program, added another layer of complexity. And with each new layer, Evelyn felt a quiet dread creeping in. What would happen if this grew too fast, too soon? One morning, Evelyn was summoned to a meeting with Elon Musk. She had no idea what the topic would be, but the urgency in the message was palpable. As she walked into the conference room, she saw Elon standing at the head of the table, flanked by a few of his top engineers and advisors. There was a sense of tension in the air. Elon didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Evelyn," he began, his tone serious, "we need to talk about the next phase of the project. The students are doing great work, and the prototype is moving along. But we're starting to get more attention than we anticipated. Other companies, investors, and governments are getting interested in what you're doing, and that brings a whole new set of challenges." Evelyn's heart raced. She had anticipated this moment, but it still felt like a shock. "What kind of challenges are we talking about?" Elon's gaze was piercing. "We're at a crossroads here. We can continue to expand the program, bring in more resources, and push for a larger-scale solution. Or we can pull back, focus on refining what we have, and make sure we're ready for the long term. There's a risk that growing too quickly could compromise the quality of the work. We might lose sight of the core mission." The words hung in the air like a cloud. Evelyn's mind raced as she processed what Elon was saying. Expand or refine. Those were the options. She could take the opportunity to turn the program into something global, an unprecedented initiative that would shape the future of space exploration and education. Or she could scale back, invest more time in perfecting the current iteration, and ensure that they were truly ready for the larger challenges ahead. Later that afternoon, Evelyn found herself standing in front of the large windows in her office, staring out at the sprawling SpaceX campus below. It had been a long time since she had felt this uncertain about anything. Her instincts had always guided her toward growth and progress, but now, the idea of slowing down felt almost like a betrayal. She had started this program with the dream of reaching as many students as possible, changing as many lives as she could. How could she just pull back now? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Claire. "Hey, I know things are moving fast, but don't forget to breathe. You've done more than you could have ever imagined. Take some time to think about what you want. I'm here when you need me." Evelyn smiled, grateful for her daughter's wisdom. It was exactly what she needed to hear. The world wasn't falling apart. There was time to think, time to breathe, but the decision still weighed heavily on her. The next day, Evelyn sat down with two of her closest colleagues, Sarah and Jamal. Both of them had been with the program from the beginning and had seen the highs and lows of the journey. If anyone could help her make sense of the crossroads she was facing, it was them. "I'm stuck," Evelyn admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "We've got so much momentum, so many opportunities ahead of us. But I'm wondering if we're moving too fast. If we grow too quickly, we risk losing sight of what made the program so special. But if we pull back, we might miss the chance to really make an impact. Jamal, who had always been a calming influence, leaned forward. Evelyn, you've always said that this program was about quality over quantity. What made it work was the personal connection, the way the students could dive into the work, really learn, and grow. If we start spreading ourselves too thin, we might lose that. Sarah nodded in agreement. It's about balance. There's nothing wrong with scaling up, but it's important that we don't lose what's at the heart of the program. We're teaching these kids to think critically, to dream big. If we start prioritizing speed and growth over that, we're missing the point. Evelyn took a deep breath. Their words resonated with her. She had always believed that quality mattered more than quantity. She had set out to make a difference, not to create something that would burn out too quickly. She needed to honor that vision. That evening, as Evelyn sat at her desk, she made a decision. She would take a step back. Instead of continuing to chase after every new opportunity, she would focus on deepening the program's core, ensuring that every student had the resources, mentorship, and time they needed to thrive. She would take the time to reevaluate the goals, the approach, and the impact they wanted to create, even if it meant delaying the larger scale of the project. Evelyn drafted a letter to Elon, explaining her thoughts and the decision she had come to. She told him that, while she was grateful for the opportunities to expand the program, she believed that pulling back would give them the chance to solidify their foundation and ensure long-term success. She also emphasized the importance of staying true to the program's original mission, to inspire and empower students, not to race toward a finish line. The next morning, Evelyn received a response from Elon. His reply was short but encouraging. I admire your decision, Evelyn. You've always been about quality, and I respect that. Let's take the time we need to build something sustainable. We'll support you in whatever you need. I trust you're making the right call. Evelyn felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice. Sometimes, the best way to move forward was to slow down. As the weeks passed, Evelyn focused on strengthening the core of the program. The students worked on more complex challenges, spending more time on each project and diving deeper into the problem-solving process. The shift allowed for greater mentorship and more individualized attention. The results were evident. Students were more engaged, and their work showed a level of depth and creativity that had been difficult to achieve with the fast-paced model they had been running before. As the program grew at a more sustainable pace, Evelyn also took the opportunity to strengthen the relationships with her team. They revisited their original vision, reaffirming their commitment to the students and their futures. In doing so, they found a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just preparing the next generation for space, they were preparing them for life. And so, Evelyn had arrived at a crossroads, only to realize that sometimes the best way forward was to pause, reflect, and choose a path that stayed true to the mission. By slowing down, she had given herself, and her students, the space to dream even bigger. The decision to slow down had not been an easy one, but Evelyn felt the weight of relief each day that passed. She knew it was the right choice, not only for the program but for her own sanity and sense of purpose. The constant pressure to grow, to expand, had started to take a toll on her, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Now, as she leaned into the slow burn of deliberate progress, she found herself reclaiming the excitement and passion that had initially driven her to create this program. However, change was never without its complications. As much as Evelyn wanted to move forward with the adjusted pace, she couldn't ignore the ripple effects that had begun to spread throughout the team. Some staff members, especially those in leadership roles within the program, began to question the slowdown. There was an energy shift in the office, a palpable unease in the air that had been absent before. The first sign came from Sarah, who had been Evelyn's most trusted advisor. Sarah had been a champion of the program's rapid expansion in the past, but now that things were slowing down, she seemed to withdraw slightly, her enthusiasm dimming. She was no longer the energetic and optimistic force she had been when the project was gaining momentum. One afternoon, Sarah requested a private meeting with Evelyn. As they sat across from each other in Evelyn's office, the tension between them was impossible to ignore. I get it, Evelyn. I understand why you want to focus on the core of the program and the quality of the work, Sarah said, her voice strained. But I'm not sure we're making the right call. We had the momentum, We had the partners interested in taking this global. This could have been huge, and now it feels like we're retreating. How do you plan on keeping everyone engaged if we don't push forward?" Evelyn had always valued Sarah's candor, but her words stung. She had known that there would be pushback, especially from those who were invested in seeing the program reach new heights. But hearing it from Sarah felt like a betrayal of sorts. She had been with her from the very beginning, and now, Evelyn wasn't sure where they stood. "I know this is hard," Evelyn replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But pushing forward too quickly risks burning out the entire program, and that's not something I'm willing to do. We need to build a foundation that will last, Sarah. It's not about giving up on the dream. It's about being smart enough to realize we need time to build something that's truly sustainable." Sarah hesitated before responding, her brow furrowing. "I understand, but I just hope you're right. I don't want to see this become something we look back on and regret." The conversation left Evelyn feeling unsettled. She could sense the shift in Sarah's energy, and she feared it was just the beginning of more doubts within the team. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn made a point to meet with each member of her core team individually. She wanted to make sure that everyone understood why the slowdown was necessary, and more importantly, that they still believed in the long-term vision. She didn't want anyone to feel alienated or unsure of the path they were on. Jamal, ever the calm presence, was the first to reassure her. "I know the pace has changed," he said during their meeting, "but I see what you're doing. The focus is different now, deeper, more thoughtful. And that's the kind of work I want to be a part of. We don't have to rush to change the world, Evelyn. We need to make sure we're doing it right." Evelyn smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. She could always count on Jamal to see the bigger picture. But Sarah's doubts lingered in the back of her mind. The next few days were difficult, as Evelyn could sense a growing distance between them. There were fewer brainstorming sessions together, fewer late-night strategy talks. Sarah had become more reserved, and Evelyn didn't know how to bring her back into the fold without making her feel like she was being dismissed. It wasn't until a week later, when they were preparing for a critical meeting with a potential partner in Europe, that things reached a tipping point. Sarah came into the office that morning with a decision in mind. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice firm. "I've decided to take on a new role outside of the program. I feel like it's time for me to step away." Evelyn felt her heart drop. She hadn't expected it to happen this way. "Sarah, I thought we were working through this. You and I, together. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us." "I know," Sarah said, her voice softening, "but I think I need a change. This program, it's changing so much, and I don't know if I'm still in sync with where you're heading. I respect what you're doing, but I'm not sure it's the right direction for me anymore." Evelyn nodded, though she felt a pang of loss. Sarah had been more than just a colleague. She had been a friend, and now, it seemed, that friendship was slipping away. The loss of Sarah was a blow Evelyn hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the practical impact of losing a key team member, it was the emotional weight of it. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed her in some way. Had she made a mistake by slowing down? Had she let her ambition cloud her judgment? The self-doubt crept back in, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn wasn't sure about the future of the program. But she knew one thing: she couldn't give up. In the aftermath of Sarah's departure, Evelyn took some time for herself. She spent a quiet weekend alone at the cabin with Claire, hoping to clear her head. As they sat on the porch one evening, Claire turned to her mother, her eyes full of concern. "You're struggling with Sarah's decision, aren't you?" Claire asked, her voice gentle. Evelyn nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I never thought it would come to this. I thought Sarah and I were in this together. But now, I'm not sure where things went wrong." Claire took her mother's hand. "Mom, you can't control everything. People change, and sometimes they grow in different directions. It's painful, but it doesn't mean you've failed. Maybe this is just part of the process, letting go of what you can't control so you can move forward with the people who are still with you." Evelyn looked out over the mountains, feeling the weight of her daughter's words sink in. Maybe this was the next step in her own evolution as a leader, learning to accept that not everyone would be on the same path forever, and that's okay. She couldn't hold on to everything. She had to trust that the people who truly believed in the mission would stay, and the others would find their own way. Back at the office, Evelyn called a meeting with the remaining team members. The air was heavy with uncertainty, but Evelyn knew she had to take charge and rebuild trust in the wake of Sarah's departure. "I know this isn't easy," she began, her voice steady but warm. "But we're still here, and we're still committed to the mission. We've always known this journey would have its bumps, but what matters is that we're still moving forward together." The team nodded, their faces reflecting a mix of determination and doubt. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of confidence. She could do this. And slowly, the team started to pull together again. The decision to slow down the pace of the program had not been easy, and the aftermath had been more challenging than Evelyn had anticipated. Sarah's departure left a hole that, despite Evelyn's best efforts, no one else seemed able to fill completely. The sense of loss, both professional and personal, loomed over her. But as the days turned into weeks, something began to shift. It was subtle at first, an unexpected email, a student breakthrough, a conversation that reignited a spark in her, but Evelyn could feel it, a glimmer of hope. One Tuesday morning, as Evelyn sifted through the usual batch of messages, one email caught her eye. It was from a former student who had left the program almost a year ago. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." Curious, Evelyn opened the message. It was from Carlos Ramirez, a bright and eager student who had shown immense promise in the early stages of the program but had struggled with personal challenges that led him to withdraw. Evelyn had always felt a pang of regret when thinking about Carlos. He had so much potential, and she had hoped he would find his way back. But this email was different. "Dear Evelyn, I hope this message finds you well. I've been thinking a lot about the time I spent in the program, and I wanted to thank you for everything. When I first joined, I didn't know what I was doing, but the challenges we faced, the way we worked through problems, the way you taught us to think, those lessons stuck with me. They shaped my path in ways I didn't understand back then. I'm now working with a small space technology startup. We're developing low-cost satellite technology to help bridge the communication gap in remote areas. It's not Mars, but it's a start. I couldn't have done it without the lessons I learned from the program and from you. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I hope one day our paths cross again." Evelyn sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen. Carlos had found his way. He had found his purpose, a small but important step that could eventually contribute to something much larger. And she had been a part of that. This email was just the beginning. Over the next few days, more students reached out, former participants who had gone on to pursue careers in engineering, environmental science, and space exploration. They were all telling the same story, how the program had given them a sense of direction, how it had changed their way of thinking, and how it had equipped them with tools they were now using to impact the world in meaningful ways. Evelyn couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. These stories weren't just a testament to the program's success. They were a reminder of why she had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about the scale, the speed, or even the massive partnerships. It was about the individuals who had been touched by the program, who had grown because of it. That was the true measure of success. Then, one morning, Evelyn walked into the lab and saw something that made her stop in her tracks. On the main project board was a diagram, a new design for a sustainable habitat on Mars. It was simple yet brilliant. The students had been working in small teams on a prototype for a greenhouse that could withstand the harsh Martian environment, and one of the teams had come up with a solution that incorporated biodome technology with advanced irrigation systems. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Jamal was standing at the board, looking over the design with a sense of pride. When he saw Evelyn, he grinned. "Take a look at this. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." The greenhouse design is not only energy efficient, but it also uses recycled water in a way that minimizes waste. It could be the first step toward creating sustainable food systems on Mars. Evelyn's heart swelled with pride. The team had done it. They had created something real, something tangible that could have far-reaching implications for future space missions. It wasn't just a theoretical model anymore. It was a step closer to reality. With Sarah's absence still weighing on her, Evelyn had started to question if she was truly capable of leading the program in a new direction. But moments like this, like the breakthrough with the greenhouse, reminded her that progress wasn't just about hitting targets or racing to meet deadlines. It was about steady, thoughtful growth. The program was evolving, yes, but it was doing so in a way that honored its original vision: to empower and inspire, to build a foundation that could withstand the pressures of the future. The team was starting to find their rhythm again. The students were more focused than ever, and even though they were no longer moving at the breakneck speed they once had, the quality of their work was reaching new heights. The program had found its footing, and Evelyn could see the impact it was having on the students, not just academically, but personally. They were growing too. One evening, after a long day in the office, Evelyn sat alone in her office, looking out over the campus. The quiet of the night surrounded her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a deep sense of peace. She thought back to the email from Carlos and the breakthroughs they were seeing in the lab. The program wasn't perfect, but it was something real. It was something that mattered. "Mom." Evelyn turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, holding a coffee mug in her hand. Her daughter had become a pillar of support in recent months, always there with a word of encouragement or a reminder to take care of herself. "You look like you're thinking a lot," Claire said, sitting down across from her. "I am," Evelyn said with a smile. "I've been thinking about how much we've accomplished and how much we still have to do. But right now, I'm just grateful. For everything." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Grateful? For what?" "For the team, for the students, for the opportunities. And for you, Claire. You've been a constant in all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Claire smiled softly, her eyes shining with the same quiet strength that had kept Evelyn going through the toughest times. "I know, but you're the one who's made this all happen. You've built something that's going to change the world. You just needed a little reminder of why you started." Evelyn felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had come so far, and despite the obstacles, the program was still moving forward, one small step at a time. It wasn't the massive leap she had once envisioned, but that was okay. Sometimes, the slow and steady path was the one that led to the greatest change. As the months passed, the program continued to thrive, growing stronger and more focused with each passing day. Evelyn had learned that it wasn't the scale of the impact that mattered most. It was the depth of it. The students were gaining knowledge and experience that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, and many of them, like Carlos, were already making their mark on the world. One afternoon, Evelyn received a call that would change the course of the program once again. It was from an influential space exploration consortium that had been following the program's progress. They were impressed by the quality of the students' work and wanted to discuss a long-term partnership. The call was brief, but the message was clear. The program was ready for its next phase. This time, however, Evelyn wasn't rushing. She would take her time, ensuring that every step was the right one. The long road to rebuilding, rethinking, and reimagining had led Evelyn to this point, a moment she knew would define the future of her program and, perhaps, her life. The path had not been easy. There had been missteps, heartaches, and moments of doubt. But she had come to realize something crucial. The value of the journey lay not in the destination, but in the evolution of those who walked it with her. Now, as she stood on the precipice of the next big chapter, Evelyn was no longer the young, impulsive leader who had started this program. She was a woman who had been tempered by experience, who understood that real change, lasting change, required patience, humility, and the courage to face the unknown. The space exploration program was about to enter its next phase, one that would take it to places Evelyn had only dreamed of when she first started. But this time, she knew she was ready. It had been a quiet week at the office, and Evelyn was sitting at her desk when her phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped her in her tracks: Riley Anderson, Director of Space Exploration at Horizon Global. Riley had been a distant ally in the early days of the program, a name that had appeared on countless lists of potential collaborators and sponsors, but one she hadn't heard from in months. For a moment, Evelyn wondered if something had gone wrong with the recent proposals they had submitted, or if this was simply a follow-up to the partnership discussions that had been ongoing. She answered the call. "Evelyn, it's Riley," came a calm voice on the other end of the line. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to reach out with something exciting." Evelyn sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. "Go ahead. I've been following your progress, and I'm impressed." The team's work on the Mars greenhouse, the sustainable energy systems, and especially your focus on quality over quantity, it's exactly what we've been looking for. I'm calling to officially offer a partnership. Horizon Global wants to back your program. We'd like to discuss an exclusive, long-term collaboration focusing on Mars colonization and space sustainability. We're ready to move forward. For a moment, Evelyn's mind went blank. This was it. The partnership she had worked so hard to establish, the culmination of years of persistence. It was everything they had hoped for, and more. This is incredible, she finally managed to say. But I need to be honest with you, Riley. This program wasn't built for a massive expansion. We've made it clear that we're focusing on slow, deliberate progress. I need to be sure we're aligned on the vision. This has to be about building something meaningful, not just scaling for the sake of it. I know, Riley said, his tone sincere. That's why we're reaching out now. Horizon Global is committed to doing things differently. We're in it for the long haul, and we're willing to support you in ways that honor your pace and vision. I think this is the perfect time for us to partner. Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This was the kind of partnership she had been waiting for, one that aligned with her values, one that respected the integrity of the program. I'm in, she said, her voice filled with conviction. Let's do this. The next few months were a blur of meetings, contract negotiations, and strategy sessions. But amidst the busy schedule, Evelyn found herself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought her here. The program was growing, yes, but this time, it was with intention, with a deeper sense of purpose. She had learned to value the voices of those around her, especially the students and team members who had been with her through thick and thin. They were the ones who had seen the value in her vision from the very beginning, even when others had doubted it. One evening, as she sat with Jamal and Claire over dinner, Evelyn finally spoke the words that had been on her mind for weeks. I think I understand now, she said softly, looking at both of them. The growth we've had wasn't because of rapid scaling. It was because we learned how to listen. Listen to each other, to the students, to our instincts. We didn't rush to the finish line, and because of that, we've built something real. Claire smiled, her eyes full of warmth. You always knew that, Mom. You just needed to trust yourself enough to see it through. Jamal added. And the world needed to see it too. Now they're ready. Evelyn smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. The program had become a true team effort, and the people around her were the ones who would carry it forward. It was an unseasonably warm afternoon when Evelyn sat down in her office and took one last look at the now familiar program files. The final contract with Horizon Global was signed, the partners were in place, and the next stage of development was set to begin. Everything was moving forward, but Evelyn felt a strange sense of stillness. Her phone buzzed again, and when she looked at the screen, it was a message from Sarah. It read, I've been following the program's progress. I'm proud of you, Evelyn. It's been a journey, and you've come so far. I hope you found what you were looking for. Evelyn took a deep breath, reading the message again. Despite everything that had happened, despite their parting ways, there was still a sense of closure. Sarah had believed in her. And even though they had gone separate ways, Evelyn knew that the foundation of what they had built together would always remain. The official announcement of the Horizon Global Partnership was made at a press conference that marked the program's transition into its next stage. Media outlets, space experts, and potential investors were all in attendance. Evelyn stood at the podium, her heart racing as she looked out at the sea of faces. She had been through so much to get to this moment. Personal losses, difficult decisions, the fear of failure. And yet, standing here now, she felt a deep sense of peace. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater than she could have ever imagined. Thank you all for being here, Evelyn began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. This program started with a dream to send humanity to Mars, to make space exploration a reality for people from all walks of life. But as we've grown, we've learned that it's not just about getting to Mars. It's about what we build along the way, the relationships, the knowledge, and the communities that will ensure our future on Earth and beyond. She paused, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. This partnership with Horizon Global represents the next chapter, but it doesn't change who we are. We remain committed to our values, to slow, deliberate growth, to quality over quantity, and to ensuring that every step we take is one that is meaningful. This is just the beginning. The applause was deafening, but Evelyn barely heard it. This was her moment of triumph. She had stayed true to her vision, and it had led her to something greater than she ever thought possible. As she stepped away from the podium, Claire and Jamal were waiting for her. "Mom," Claire said, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it." "We all did," Evelyn replied, smiling. "And this is just the start." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?